Hey, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm breaking down who you need on your team when you're selling your home as a FSBO. Now, let's talk about the 3 phases of selling your home without an agent. So first, you're going to have the pre-listing phase. Then we're going to get into the on-market or actively listed phase. And then we're going to finish up with the under contract or contract to close phase. Now, what you're going to learn is who are the people you need at each one of these phases to be successful with your contract and essentially sell your home on your own without having to go and hire an agent 3 or 6 months later when the house has just been sitting on the market. So first up, let's look at the pre-listing phase. The first thing you're really going to want to consider is getting a professional cleaning, or you can clean the home yourself. Just make sure you do a really good job of decluttering. All right. This is pretty generic information, but the reason why they tell you that, or most agents will tell you that, hey, you got to clean up your house or declutter it or depersonalize it, is because most of the times when people come into your home to look, they want to see what they will look like in the house. So if it's personalized with, let's say, unique furniture or even pictures of your family, it really prevents them from getting that personal feel, right? It still feels like the owner's home. Now that leads us into our next point. You want to get professional photos, and professional photos make a huge difference in how the listing looks online. We've seen what those look like, and they're not great. They really do turn buyers off, and you only have so much time to make a good first impression before more homes come on the market and kind of crowd you out. Next up, you may want to consider a staging company, especially if your house is vacant or cluttered. Staging can really help buyers imagine what the potential of the home for their own uses is going to be, right? If they can't picture it because it's vacant, then they might move on to a home that does have everything squared away in the living room or the kitchen, and it's just like, oh, I can see myself living here, and they decide to put an offer in on that property versus yours. Now, the next thing you're going to want to look at getting is a inspection and a WDO inspection. So like a pre-inspection, just check the house out, make sure there's nothing major. And then the same thing for the WDO, which stands for the wood destroying organisms. And they're looking for things like termites and damage to the wooden framing inside the house or any components of the home that has wood, right? And what you can do is take those reports and you can put in your description and say, hey, I have a pre-inspection that was done prior to listing, and I have a WDO. And if the buyer wants, I can send that out to them. And a lot of times those agents representing buyers will ask for that information so they can look at it. And if it has a clean bill of health, there's less chance of problems with the home versus one that they're looking at that doesn't have any information, and they have to go under contract to really do the due diligence to figure out if there's anything there. And then there's the risk of, if they do find something, okay, now we have to negotiate around what that problem is. And sometimes that actually ends up blowing up the deal, which is not good. The more unknowns that you can kind of bring to the table and make known, the more comfortable and confident the buyer's going to feel putting an offer with your home. So that's why it's really important that you do these little things that can add a lot of clarity as to what the home is like. The last pro move that you can make in the pre-listing phase is to get 2 or 3 insurance quotes and include that in your description, right? And also make it available. So then that way, once again, buyers have an opportunity to see like, okay, how much is it going to cost to insure this house? Because I guarantee, I've had this happen to myself as well, where we get like a week away from closing and the buyers still can't find like affordable insurance. And in Florida, the insurer of last resort is called Citizens. And so what we've seen is a lot of companies leaving Florida because, it doesn't work for their systems and they're not profitable. So then everybody has to go into the public insurance, which is Citizens. And the rate is still super duper high. And they're like, oh man, I can't afford this. And they end up having to pull out of the deal, right? Because they're not going to buy something that they can't afford. And unfortunately, if they had known going into the contract before they made an offer and went under contract that the insurance was going to be way too high, they would have saved themselves and the seller their time and their earnest money deposit. So to recap with the pre-listing phase, just make sure the house is clean. You get good-looking photos. Try to get some type of inspection that you can share with the buyer's agent or the buyers themselves. And also make sure you can try to get some quotes. It doesn't cost anything to get some insurance quotes and also share that with the buyers, because the more information the buyer has, the easier it is to make a decision. Now let's move on to the actively listed phase. So once your home is on the market, you need a title company picked out. You may negotiate on who chooses the title company between the buyer and the seller when you have an offer. But often I would see that if the buyer had a company they wanted to use, then the seller was able to negotiate the buyer to pay much of those title fees. But that depends on your area and what the laws are in your state. So check with your title company and an attorney that you are thinking of working with. Now, you want one that is patient with FSBO sellers. And what I mean is you want a title company that has worked with FSBO sellers before, because you're going to have questions that they typically wouldn't get from a seasoned real estate agent. So just make sure that when you're looking for one in the reviews, that you figure out that, hey, okay, they've worked with FSBO sellers before and they can communicate well. And if you can just pick up the phone and call them, it's that much easier to just make sure that the deal is going through how it's supposed to when you're under contract. Next, you're going to want to have a relationship with a mortgage broker or a loan officer in the local area. And the reason why I say that is because there are times when the buyer's agent may struggle to, get their client financed. Now they shouldn't, but they do sometimes. It just happens. And so you can offer up your contact to help the buyer, have a mortgage broker or have a loan officer. And local loan officers have connections and they have networks that can help you out. The big takeaway with this active on the market phase of having a title company and the mortgage brokers is that you're not an agent. So working with these people really matters because they have a network of individuals that you can leverage. And title companies and mortgage brokers have to work closely together to make sure that the deal closes. Now, as a seller, you're not really going to see this as much as the buyer's side, right? Because the broker is doing the due diligence for the buyer, the appraisals, all that stuff on the buy side is a little bit more involved. So you're not going to really see as much on the sell side, but you can still leverage those connections, especially if the title company is working on your behalf because you picked them out. So now you've got an offer, you've negotiated, and you've accepted. So congratulations, you are officially under contract. What does this mean and what happens next? Now is when the clock starts and the buyer has to make that earnest money deposit, right? It's just putting skin in the game on the buyer's side. And if they're in breach of contract down the road, then it becomes a discussion of where does the earnest money deposit go? Does it go to the seller? Does it go to the buyer? But it's essentially to put skin in the game. Most escrow periods are about 30 to 45 days for FHA or VA loans, and about 2 to 3 weeks for the conventional, and even sooner for all cash deals, right? And there's all different types of financing out there, but those are the most common that you're going to find. Now, if you don't have an agent, you're going to be the one coordinating with the title company and the buyer's agent. And all that stuff needs to be done pretty fast to make sure that by the third week, everything is locked in so that you can close on time. And the things that I'm talking about are getting insurance, like making sure that the buyer has insurance in place so that like when you're 1 week out, it's not like, hey, we can't close because, there's no insurance, right? Good agents have people that follow up. And in a few seconds, we're going to kind of get into who these people are. The secret that most agents don't tell anybody about is they're using a transaction coordinator once the home goes under contract. They're going back and they're trying to, get another client. Like that's how they make most of their money. So it's not doing admin work. And that's why they hand it off to a transaction coordinator. Now, the transaction coordinator will handle all the administrative work, right? They follow up on appointments and deadlines and make sure that, the appraiser is able to get over to the house and do the appraisal and all the things, right? And you don't necessarily want to do that unless you have the time to do that, right? And so they make sure you don't miss anything. Now, the best part is they charge per transaction, and that could typically run you around $400, which is significantly lower than, what you would pay to an agent. And the agent, like I just told you, is going to do the same exact thing where Once they get this bad boy like under contract, they're handing it off to the TC, and then they're moving back to getting more clients, right? So it's important to recognize the value in using people that have flat fees for their services. And you don't have to use them, but if you don't do it, then you're going to be responsible for making sure that the deal closes on time and there's no big issues, right? So, to recap, during the pre listing phase, you want to make sure you have a photographer, a cleaner, a pre inspection and WDO inspection, and insurance quotes. When you're listed, you want to make sure you have a title company and a local mortgage broker that you can talk to if you have any questions. Last, once you're under contract, you want a transaction coordinator. All of these people will ensure that you have a great FSBO experience and that you don't have that problem of getting deep into the contract phase and then realizing it's not going to work. And then you have to start all over by listing the home on the market again, right? Because that can cause more delays and you have your life to live. And so those steps that I talked about in the pre-listing phase are really going to be the ones that set you up to bulletproof your deal and just lock in a one-time offer all the way to close. Now, drop any questions you have in the comment section below. I would love to read them and answer them and kind of see what your thoughts are on with my system of how I broke it out into those three different phases. If this video helped you in any way, please feel free to check out the next one where I'm going to show you how to price your home with a CMA, which is a comparative market analysis. I'm going to do that step by step using only free resources. And I'll be honest, it's not as hard as they make it seem, especially with the tools available today. It's the same thing that your agent's going to do when you hire them and they're like, hey, this is what I think your house could be sold for, right? So I'll see you in the next one, and thanks again.